I'm Stuart Miller, I'm co-founder and CEO of Begbroke. We're headquartered here in Oxfordshire, although today we've got about 500 people in 5 countries. So the headline title of this 4th session on practical innovation is How to Innovate with Other People. And I think it was at the 1st or 2nd session that we threw out a definition, there are lots, but we threw out a definition of innovation as being the commercial application of creativity. And if we go with that for a minute, it's pretty hard to do that without doing it with other people. You can't really do that sort of thing on your own. So if you're going to do something of commercial value, you've got to do it in the context of usually your customers. So that's what I'll be talking about for a little bit, and then I'll hand over to Tony to pick up the baton. Tony, Frank's given me a strict edict to try and stick to practical examples, so I will actually, I'll try and behave myself and not go too far off piste. There was a subtext actually to the title of the talk, which is, do we need another textbook, another website, or maybe a social media actually address some of those things. My view is, of course, we don't need another textbook, we don't need any more websites, but it's not because of social media. All that social media has really done, in my mind, is to enrich the conversation that we should all be having with each other anyway. So what I wanted to do was to spend probably 10 minutes or maybe more than that on a conversation that started between Begbroke and one of our customers back in January 2007, and just to sort of talk through at a fairly brisk pace the sort of innovation journey that we've been on with them since. And what I want to try and do is tell the story and then pull out from the story some things that might be generically true, and then hopefully they can be challenged together and see if we can draw out some things that might be sort of practically useful. So we're very lucky actually, because we've got about 250 customers, and for the most part, most of them are really up for innovating with us. 2 years ago we won the, it's not a very sexy title, but it's the Motor Transport Award for Innovation. Last year we won the IFW Award for Innovation, and I found out last week, great timing for this event actually, that we've just been shortlisted for the Partnership Award for Innovation. So I thought that's great in terms of the headline for this talk. It had to innovate with other people, so with cable and wireless actually. But the conversation I want to talk about was actually with Fujitsu, and it started back in January 2000, and they weren't a customer at the time. And we had a chat with someone from Fujitsu, and I don't know if who's first one of these sessions. Is this anyone sort of first time at one of these events? Okay, so because I was conscious that I've really skipped through this example before, but and it involved a company that we were competing head on with, and as I mentioned in the previous session, that we absolutely hated each other. It's a company called Business Direct, and Business Direct were supplying Fujitsu. And Fujitsu was Business Direct's biggest customer, so we were going to move heaven and earth to try and win Fujitsu and do some damage to our competitor. And we met this guy from Fujitsu called Craig Crawley, and it was just a casual conversation. It happened to be in our office, which is really neither here nor there. And for those who don't know, actually, most of you probably don't, what we do as a business is to move spare parts around through lockers for companies like Cable and Wireless and British Telecom and so on. So someone like Fujitsu should be in our core space. They've got loads of technology, loads of field engineers that fix broken machines. We should be moving their parts around for them. And we got Craig on an unfortunate time. It was a Friday afternoon, and he was particularly upset with the sales he was getting from our competitor, and was moaning about the fact that there's never any new ideas, never any new innovation. They just see their world as transport and wouldn't ever sort of think to move beyond that. So we started to explore what would the right kind of supply chain look like for a company like Fujitsu. So when you think what Fujitsu does, it has customers like Marks & Spencer, and Marks & Spencer will ring them to say that the point of sale machine on lane 17 in the Marks & Spencer's in Slough has just gone down. And you think the world's going to stop spinning because of that, but the fact there's 30 other aisles is ringing here or there. And so what happens next is really interesting, because Business Direct would send out, on Fujitsu's instruction, 3 spare parts to go and fix that machine. Why 3? Well, because I don't know exactly what's wrong with the machine. So you might send a video card, a CPU board, and a memory card. But what you can't do is afford for the engineer to go back twice. So the engineer will turn up to a locker, get the parts out, go to the store, fix the broken machine. So he's then got 1 broken part that he's swapped out, and 2 completely unused parts. And what was happening in Fujitsu's world at this time was that there was no discipline around that supply chain. There would just be parts literally everywhere. It would be taking months and months for the parts to come back. Getting them into the return repair loop would take even longer. It was just chaos. So we sort of let the conversation back in January 2000 drift into what could this look like. Well, when you think about it, if parts are going out, to fix broken machines, everything that goes out must come back. It either comes back as swapped out and broken, or completely unused. So surely there must be a way of putting some discipline around that. Some discipline to actually control the supply chain, to give visibility where the inventory is, and to drive it to whoever needs it next. So it was a Friday afternoon, the conversation drifted into a sort of constructive place, and we sort of left it at that. Apart from the fact that we couldn't help ourselves after that, and we spent the next 2 or 3 weeks sketching out what really should that look like then. What we really should have is every one of their parts serialised with individual barcodes, so we can effect the movement really effectively through a transport network with software and scanning and so on. Doesn't sound particularly difficult, apart from the fact that Fujitsu had 65,000 physical parts and only 3% of them were serialised. It was when they had the Camelot contract with the National Lottery. It was an absolute chaos, which had manifested itself in Fujitsu bloating its balance sheet with inventory to 110 million. So the value of the inventory on their balance sheet was 110 million. So as the sort of spring 2007 went on, we started to build a software platform called Thinventory, because what would work for Fujitsu would work for Ricoh, for Canon, for Dell, for IBM, for anyone else that was in that kind of space. And in May 2007, we went back to Fujitsu to say, can we show you this thing that we've sort of built? It's not finished, it's really a prototype, but let me show you what we could do in your world. If we could serialise 65,000 parts for you, then when something goes out, we can make sure, we can give you visibility to make sure that it's come back within how long? How long do you want? 48 hours? That's absolutely fine. Why should it be 9 months, which is what it was? And we've done some rough calculations to think we should at least be able to halve the value of that 110 million on your balance sheet to really sort of bring some proper commercial advantage to this kind of innovation. So anyway, you can guess what happened next. They went out to tender, and to cut the very long story short, we won it. Absolutely thrilled to bits. So the problem was, we didn't only win it, we won this on the contract on our Thinventory software platform stroke prototype in 5 countries. So, and anyone that's sort of been involved in a startup to a rapid growth phase will know that you definitely come to a point where you are in the toilet sobbing, and this happened to me, and it actually literally happened. It was in July 2007, it was on a Saturday night, it was about 3 o'clock in the morning, the software was still all over the floor, and I just put my head on the desk and sobbed, and I just thought, how on God's earth I've done this to myself, I don't know, but fortunately, Craig Corley was still involved, by the way, the initial visionary in Fujitsu, and we were just properly building this thing that we had a vision for. So fortunately, largely because Craig's career depended on it, and we were all into this thing too deep, we managed to pull through it, and finally we got to a phase where one day was better, not worse, than the previous one, and on we went. So today, the value of inventory on Fujitsu's balance sheet is 9 million. And that's because the inventory, 65,000 parts were serialised in 5 weeks. It was difficult, it wasn't straightforward, which is why I ended up crying. And we do automatically move parts around, so when parts get moved back into one of our lockers, the engineer says, have you used it or not? Oh, yes, I've used that one, that one's broken, this one, nothing wrong with it. Okay, if there's anything wrong with it, who needs it? If Frank needs it next, we'll send it to Frank. Don't send it back to the Fujitsu warehouse, what's the point in doing that? So we're now in a situation where this platform that we've built is pinging inventory all over the place, which is why you need a lot less of it. So, and unsurprisingly, we've sold that platform now to Cable & Wireless, to Computer Centre, to Ricoh, to Conoco Minolta, and so on. Did I need social media to do that? No. I just needed to listen properly to a customer that was willing to have a proper conversation with us. So when I think back on that whole Fujitsu sort of experience, and we had a review of them yesterday, and I'll sort of probably finish on something that came out of the review, which is fascinating. What things are potentially generically applicable to that sort of journey, which took about 5 years? Well, the first thing is, you obviously have to listen, and that's not a new thing, that's a very low-tech thing to do, just to shut up and listen to the customer. And I don't think as Buybox, despite these lovely awards we've won and the growth we've enjoyed, I don't think we've thought of anything ourselves. It's all been with others. We just listened, actively listened to the customer. So that's a very obvious thing. But the second thing is, there is no point listening if you haven't got the wherewithal and the attitude to actually do something about it. So if you go back to that example, there would have been no point listening to my man Craig Crawley if I wasn't prepared to do a version of Build It and They'll Come. So he didn't say, if you build your inventory platform, we'll back-to-back it with a contract, which is what, unfortunately, most companies do. They say, well, we need to back-to-back it and then we'll build it. Well, hang on a minute, isn't it your responsibility to build this and then sell it? And it might sound naive to build it and they'll come, but in our experience, you have to. You've got a responsibility to build the product before you can have every hope of selling it. So there's an element of of being bold with whatever you're going to do. And if you don't back yourself, then who should? So I look at that and think, well, did we listen to Craig? Yes. Well, did we have the attitude and the wherewithal and just the energy to want to act on whatever it was he was saying? And obviously I mean the whole market, we did. Have we done this before in other ways and been wrong? Of course. We're wrong more than we're right, quite frankly. But again, I think that if you are looking to innovate with people and it's your customers, you have to be prepared to be bold and accept that not every time it's going to work. So that's kind of, for me, probably the end of that particular story. There's just two other things that I just want to sort of say before I hand over to Tony. The first one is that our commitment to innovation is just part of our culture. It's just how we think and it's what we do, and it's more around being curious about how could we do things differently. And part of that curiosity for me is driven by how you define your relationship space with your customer. So whenever I have a review with a customer, I don't start with our KPIs. For God's sake, they know our KPIs. They know what our delivery percent. They know all of that claptrap. I want to know, what are your sales team selling? It's none of my business really, because I'm not your sales team, but what are you as a company selling? Mostly it's irrelevant to what we do, but just tell me what you're selling. I want to understand how I can support that. So a couple of years ago, with Fujitsu again, we do have other customers by the way, not just Fujitsu, but we had the review, had the conversation, what are you selling? Well, we're trying to support the future of retail, which is interesting as the conversations that will be coming out as part of this group over the summer. We want to support the future of retail. We're a bit worried though because the high street's in a bad place. So we had a really good conversation around, which that's really interesting because as Begbroke, we're now investing to about £2 million on rolling out more electronic lockers with a big touch colour screen to support online retailers to offer a more efficient way in which you can deliver and collect your online shopping. So if you're not into receiving shopping, send it to one of our lockers. You won't own the locker because you won't use it often enough. You just get sent a text message, go and collect your stuff, and that's that. With a nice big touch colour screen. We're not retailers or marketeers, but it's pretty obvious that you can do some interesting stuff with that colour screen. Fujitsu, you're a technology company, surely there's some common ground there. Your customer's M&S, there has to be an interesting conversation to have there. So just like with Craig Crawley in January 2000, a couple of years ago, funny enough with Craig's boss actually in this particular time, a guy called Andy Mears, we had a chat around what that might look like and painted a picture of a scenario where a young lady buys some red shoes on a fashion retail website, and just before she checks out, or she's got a white pair in her basket as well, and just before she checks out, she takes the white pair out and only buys the red pair. They know that. So we delivered them into our electronic locker into door 3, and speculatively, under the radar, for fun, deliver the white ones into door 4. And when she goes to collect the red shoes, she pops a code into the screen, and there's a little message on there, and a nice touch colour. Oh, but you know those white ones you had your eye on? They're in door 4 right now, 10% off. Do you want to buy them right now? So we kind of let things drift into that. And the reason I'm saying this is a hilarious thing happened yesterday, where we had the review with Andy Mears, and on Monday, Andy and his team were at a Fujitsu conference, and it was one of those sort of pan-European things where you've got all sorts of different parts of Fujitsu with their own little table, and they're all telling each other what they're getting up to. So Andy goes up to this table, and it's this particular part of Fujitsu was responsible for manipulating data and doing clever things with masses of data, the sort of data that Tesco would have with its club card members. So big data. And these guys then say to Andy, one of the things we want to do is to work with those delivery kiosks, as they were, kiosk-type companies. And can you imagine the situation where a young lady's bought some red shoes, and they proceeded to tell Andy the very same story that we painted 2 years ago, which is absolutely hilarious. So, in closing, the one I've talked a lot about, or only about, innovating with other people being your customer. But of course you can innovate with all sorts of other groups of people, with suppliers, with trade partners, with competitors, with people completely outside of your sort of traditional space. And it's something that I find really fascinating, how you can get some innovation spark by spending time with people that have got really nothing to do with your world. So in closing, it's about a year ago, I was asked to join the advisory board of Loughborough University Business School, which was great. First meeting, I sat next to a guy who's also obviously on the board, called David Sparks. And David Sparks runs British Swimming. So on the face of it, absolutely nothing to do with Firebox at all. And I just thought to myself, I wonder how he does what he does. I mean, running British Swimming must be totally different to, well, it is obviously so different to what I do. And so I said, can I come and see you just for a chat? I'm not trying to tell you anything, I just want to understand what you do. So popped up to see David Sparks about 6 months ago, and it's in a great building in Loughborough. Loads of people buzzing around. You get a feel for a place when you go into a site. Really buzzy, really brisk, everyone's kind of on it. Sat down, had a chat, and said, what do all these people do here then? If you're on British Swimming, how many people are here? Oh, about 65. What are they doing? Oh, it's admin, finance, planning. So planning, what sort of planning are you doing? Oh, for the Olympics, 2 Olympics out with an eye on the 3rd. Wow, that's long range planning. What exactly are you doing? We're trying to work out where to put the training camps and so on. I said, wow, that's really interesting. So we're chatting about other things. And said, how do you define success then? And without even thinking, he said, Olympic gold medals. I was immediately jealous. I thought, God, how wonderful. Just to have that purity, just one-dimensional clarity. Success is... And what do you think you might get this year then, David? 12. Bang. Knew the answer. Wallop. Everyone out there is driven by 12 Olympic gold medals. And on the way back, I thought, do you know what? I'm here being jealous of this guy, thinking your world is so beautifully simple. But it's beautifully simple because he made it that way. He decided, and I just thought, you know, I need to find I haven't done it yet, by the way, I need to find my own version of 12 Olympic gold medals. But I wouldn't have thought like that unless I'd taken the time to kind of have a conversation with someone else with a view to try and learn something about how they might innovate in their business. Thanks very much. Turn it over to Tony.